I am being watched. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be season 1, episode 10 of Person of Interest. This is called Number Crunch. They're going to be my thoughts, my review on the episode. Once again, they have shaken up the formula quite a bit by having multiple numbers at the same time. We have 4 numbers, which lead to 4 potential victims, or as pointed out at the start, could equally be one of them try to kill the other 3. They could all be killers. They could all be victims. It turns out they're all victims, and there's a kind of this car crash that links them all together, which we kind of keep seeing snippets of throughout the episode. But before we get to that, the bigger stuff obviously is the ongoing character development and relationship of Reese and a Detective Carter, where it really comes to head here. Obviously, last episode, he saved her life in the alleyway, and I really liked seeing that there was a direct follow-up to this, where she is being grilled by the authorities in the police station, because this is very, suspect. Someone was about to kill her. This mysterious guy then killed the perpetrator and just ran off. That she's being grilled by internal affairs or whoever it is. And it eventually leads to, now I think his name's Michael Kelly. Let me just double check that. I always forget this guy's name, but I think it's Michael Kelly. Why is he not, why is he not on the first page of the cast list? I have to go to more cast. It is Michael Kelly. I was right. Okay. I was just, this is the sort of actor who pops up in a ton of stuff. Like, I've seen him in maybe a dozen things in the last 20 years, and I always go, it's that guy. And every time I check his name, and I think it's finally starting to stick that his name is Michael Kelly. But he shows up and he's looking for John. It turns out when he talks to Carter later in the episode, when she's being followed by him, that he knows who John is, and he's looking for him. And he says, "Hey, John murdered his CIA handler, the woman we saw in the flashbacks a couple episodes ago." Says that he has killed as many people for his country as he has just simply killed. Now, we know him well enough at this point, and I don't think there's any part of this that's remotely convincing to the audience, but it makes sense that from Carter's perspective, this sounds all very like, oh, he might just be a really, really bad guy. And that sets up some tension. It's like, oh, it's making her question if she should maybe continue forming this friendship. Even Fusco early on in the episode says to her, hey, maybe it's for the best the guy got away, you didn't see his face, because you wouldn't know whether to arrest him or thank him. And Carter says to that, she responds to that statement as saying, no, that's easy, I'd arrest him, because Carter's good, she plays by the book. But of course, as the episode goes on, when Reese contacts her because of the case that he's working on, she does take the moment to thank him, right? So sort of going back in what she said earlier. And then when she does lead Michael Kelly and his goons to Reese, and that's our big showdown for the episode. The main plot's done. The main plot wraps up about 5 minutes before the end. And the big memorable moment of this episode is that because Reese has told Carter where he's going to be, or well, he didn't say that exactly, but he said, hey, people are going to be at this location related to this case, and Carter was able to predict that, yeah, he would probably be there as well, because he's usually there for these things. And sure enough, this showdown happens where, he calls him John, right? Michael Kelly's character, and John Reese knows who he is too. They clearly know each other. But the big thing here is that earlier in the episode, Michael Kelly said to Carter that they wanted to help him. They wanted to bring him in and help him, right? They wanted to stop him from hurting anyone else, but they wanted to help him. That was a key phrase he used. And that is immediately proven bullshit, which is obviously important for Carter's next decision, because Carter is ultimately going to choose to let him go. And that's perhaps why. Not only did he save her, not only has he proven himself to be something of a, outside the system, but certainly an ally of sorts over the course of these episodes. But Michael Kelly and his goons have proven themselves to be liars, because they just take a shot at him. They've got a sniper who takes a shot at his stomach, so Reese gets shot twice, and he's hobbling down the stairs, and he's saying to Finch over the phone, thanks for giving me a second chance. He's making peace with his maker. He's ready to go. But Finch is determined to get there and pick him up. And Carter gets there, gets after him just in time to see Finch with him and recognizes him, of course, because she questioned him. Remember the whole robbery at the evidence locker several episodes ago? She knows who Finch is. Maybe not his real identity per se. It depends how well he's covering his tracks. I can't remember if his real name was going around, but she knows who this is, and she makes the choice to put her gun away and tells him to go. And it's a big moment. It's a big moment of like kind of returning the favor almost from last episode. And she feels responsible, of course, because she's the one who led these guys to him, and it's got him possibly killed, or nearly killed at the very least. So she feels this guilt. She acts on it, and that's kind of her big ending to the episode. So obviously all this is big stuff. This is all big forward momentum, character development for the show, because now in some level she has now, this is the first time she's actively done something that she would be able to get in trouble for. Now obviously they're trying to like pin stuff on her throughout this whole episode, so it's not that she needs to be guilty for the system to punish her necessarily, but this is the first time she has had the agency and made a choice to do something that is technically the illegal choice, but morally, as far as she is concerned in the moment, to be right. And that in a way bonds her to Reese in a way that she hasn't up until this point, and that is a very fascinating development. It's also very exciting seeing all this showdown. Someone who knows who Reese is like popping up looking for him is also kind of a big deal, because like no one's really shown up looking for him throughout the show so far. So that's a big potential thing. I expect we're going to see Michael Kelly again. Obviously, from Carter's story, it's going to look like she pursued him and maybe just didn't get there in time. I wonder if there'll be further questioning as to that in the next episode, in the same way that this followed on from her being saved by Reese in the last episode. But all of this stuff was super exciting. It's all the big sort of serialized parts of the show that you get really into. And on top of all that, this episode does go through, so it follows up everything with Carter, so it doesn't just feel like last episode was on an island, which is great, but it also kind of nudges forward everything else, because Fusco also has to be directly involved with the team this time, because they have 4 people and one of them's already turned up dead before Reese even gets to the first victim. It's like, shit, we've got 3 people to try and protect, and it's just me. So Finch has to follow one. They have Fusco going after another, or Detective Fiasco, as someone calls him in this episode. I like that. And Reese goes after the third one. He goes after the one who works at the salon, the beauty place. And they're all going after these different people, and we sort of learned throughout the episode how they're all connected and all the rest of it. But there's little moments that I really enjoy, like Fusco calling Reese and saying, "Hey, I know these things. You might want to tell this to your little friend with the glasses." And then Finch just says, "I'm here, Detective Fusco." And Fusco's like, of course you are." So I enjoy those little moments that it kind of feels like there's more of a team forming that's not just Reese and Finch. And it feels like Fusco is now being given direct jobs occasionally. Not to say that he's a full-fledged member or they're trusting him completely yet, but it certainly feels like he's becoming more incorporated as time goes on, as necessity arises, which it definitely did in this episode because they had so many possible people to follow. And of course, Finch has to deal with the fact that he fails to save someone. It's not really his fault. He's not trained to recognize the signs, but he's monitoring the man of the 4 that's in trouble, and just too late notices that a baby stroller has been left next to his car, and realizes that it's probably an explosive. And he doesn't do, Reese tells him to get down. He already knows it's too late, so he just tells Finch to get down to protect himself. But Finch, of course, wants to help people. The entire reason he started all this is because he felt guilty about not helping people. So he feels some level of guilt over this. And, and if I have a critique about the episode, it's almost that some of these things are almost a little too quick and don't get as much time to explore. That particularly also is a little bit more of Finch getting a little bit antsy about Reese looking into his privacy, which, Reese doesn't even do intentionally, really. He just kind of picks up a book, and a photo of young Finch and his friend pops out. But yeah, so all that stuff is all fine enough. The main plot, though, having the 4 potential suspects or victims, does shake things up again from before because it gets everyone involved. And then the resolution to it is fairly straightforward, and I think that's by design. One, because we have so many people to keep track of, that having a super complex reason behind it with lots of twists would be impossible to fit in. But also because this episode's got a more important thing to do for the last like 5 or so minutes, you have to be able to wrap it up a little bit earlier. So you've got, these things to juggle, and I think it decides what to do with its time wisely. I think this might even have the highest rating in IMDb so far of all the episodes, which I don't think I would say this is the best episode, although I completely understand why it's rated very highly. I think, the episode with the nurse who wanted to get revenge for her sister, the episode with the judge, and Witness that introduced our man Elias, I think all of those are all probably, I'd probably rank them all a little bit higher than this one, but that's not to say anything negative about this. Like I say, there's like minor critiques at best. It's a very exciting episode because it does advance the overall character relationships, and I think it's impressive at this point that the character relationships are enough to like keep it all so enticing. Like the main plots are like episode to episode are like strong enough and entertaining enough for the most part. There's only been kind of one weaker one, I would say, so far. But the fact that it's just exciting seeing these characters interact more, and just when you're thinking, oh, maybe, is that going to be enough? They introduce this third party. They introduce Michael Kelly, and they say CIA. Is he really CIA? Or is he still CIA? It sort of feels like the guy who might be working off the books now, or doing something more illegal. Or maybe it is just that part of the government is this shady and are just this, like, black ops style, we need to assassinate this guy because he poses a threat. Which also makes you think, like, what else does Reese know? Is it just because he's dangerous, or is he dangerous because he knows things? Is he dangerous because of all the secret things he knows the government's been up to, because he was the one, doing the assassinations for so long, or whatever it may be? There's a lot of little things that open up from that, which is really nice. But yeah, back to the main plot though. The whole thing turns out to be that the car crash was the senator's son, who was a coke addict, who was embezzling money. There was like a fake charity scheme set up for children, and these 4 people who found the car, found the bag of money, realized it had to be illegal because of just the this guy with coke all over his face, like, just crashed his car. So they divvy it up amongst them, and it's those 4 people who are being killed throughout the episode. 2 of them die. The last 2, who turn out to be foster sisters, live. And maybe I would raise a slight eyebrow that, Finch keeps saying there's no connection between the 4 people. I have to imagine there is a record eventually of these 2 being foster sisters. Maybe just Finch didn't get to it, and that's, fair enough. But I admit that it's a more buried link than maybe a lot of the more obvious things to look for are, but it feels like something that would come up eventually, and it didn't throughout the episode. So yeah, it's just worth pointing out. And there's a few predicaments that come from this, which is Reese finding the 2 foster sisters at a house, them being freaked out by it, and the assassin comes to the door, so we get a bit of a fight scene there, and it's perfectly fine. There's a bit of comedy with Reese going to see her earlier on in the episode. He goes to see the woman who works at the salon, and she immediately, like, because he goes in thinking that she's about to be attacked by a messenger, turns out to be a false alarm, but he then ends up finding himself standing in the lobby of this place and has to just sort of have an excuse. So he says he's there to make an appointment, and she just grabs him and puts him in a chair, and it almost feels like it's going to go into a comedy episode of him, like, putting up with all these hairdressers and whatnot, all I don't know, talking around him, and immediately she starts saying, "Hey, single ladies," and they all start going, "Ooh." It's a bit of levity in an episode that I wouldn't say has a lot of levity. It's a pretty serious, high stakes episode. I think if I was to make another critique, is that it does this thing where the 2 foster sisters, the reason why they wanted the money, which maybe separates them from the other 2 who died, who just bought a bike and some Blu-ray players, is 11 just now? Maybe 2012 by the time this aired. So it was on that cusp of the mid-season break. Blu-ray players, hot item, right? That's one of those weird things that always dates shows and movies is when what people are spending their valuables on. If they mention technology, it's like, oh, I got a new iPod. Oh, good for you. You watch the first Fast and the Furious, and they're stealing DVD players because DVD players are so valuable, and now they're basically free. So it does this thing where the two sisters want the money because their mum's sick, and it's to pay for her medical bills. And once there's a bit of a fight in the car park where Reese takes out the assassins and saves them, he's like, okay, by this point the whole scheme with the money and the corrupt senator whose son was involved, and the senator seems to be involved and behind all these assassinations and whatnot. Finch has already scared them into running away basically by pointing out that the fake charity's been found out online. Finch once again goes in pretending to be some other rich dude and puts the fear in him, and that's all fine. So it does this little thing where it's okay, they've got this more understandable reason that's less greedy for wanting the money. It's more of a necessity, and Reese tells him to keep it, and it's this kind of like, hey, okay, you can go and help your mum who we've seen lying in a hospital bed. And I mean, it's perfectly fine, but it did kind of come off to me that, again, because there's so much in this episode, when I think back to other episodes that have got more sympathetic people of interest, they're way more developed in the other episodes, and that is again, it's an issue of this having 4 people of interest, even if 2 of them are heavily linked, and also having other more serialized things that the episode has to spend time on. So as a result, it's a very quick, rapid fire way of saying, hey, they've got a sympathetic reason, which feels a little bit of a shortcut, which isn't really like a complaint per se, just as a sort of acknowledgement of why it doesn't feel as effective, because it's not as important or as big a part of the episode. So maybe making me care about the victims here wasn't as good. It wasn't as effective as previous episodes where I really get into their story and I really rooted for the judge to get his son back, or whatever it might have been in previous episodes. So it's just acknowledging some of the things that get sort of traded for the time that we spend on other stuff, or traded for the fact that we have 4 people of interest in this case. So whereas, because other episodes have a lot more reveals about, okay, what are they really up to, and oh, this is what they really care about, oh, and this is what that is. Here it's kept quite straightforward by design, I think, because it has to work with all this other stuff going on. So no, that is good. They keep the Agent Carter cam on her desk going. That's how Finch is aware that Carter's turned Reese in. He's listening to the phone calls and hears that. It was just a nice bit of continuity that's still popping up like that. That's very nice. Yeah, actually, I'm always kind of paying attention during this show because it's set in New York, and I feel like it looks very expensive because they do have scenes where they're out in the streets, and I don't know if they're in some other city and they're just doing a really good job of making it feel like a New York street. At least as far as movie and TV New York scenes feel like, I've never been to New York myself, but I feel like every few episodes there'll be a scene. There was a lot in the first couple because they were establishing things, but there was a scene in this. It's where Detective Carter. Agent Carter's a Marvel person. Detective Carter's walking down the street, and this is where she notices she's been followed by Michael Kelly. And it occurred to me that I don't know if I've seen a lot of Carter walking through streets, because it was usually Reese and maybe Finch with Reese. You get crime scenes on street corners and things like that, but this was more like walking in like busy foot traffic and whatnot. And I do wonder to what extent they were pulling this off with what I had to imagine was a budget. It's maybe the sort of thing I'm going to expect to die down as the show goes on, because I know it was almost it was on the verge of being cancelled at one point. And luckily it got its final seasons to wrap up its story. But I'm curious if maybe the budget got slashed a little bit later on, if we're going to maybe see less, busy New York street scenes as time goes on. It was just something that occurred to me as I was watching that particular scene. But just an observation that I think's worth pointing out. But I guess that's pretty much it. I kind of sped through the main plot, because the main plot's perfectly fine, but it's not the meat of the episode. It's the guys coming to talk to Carter. It's Carter choosing whether or not to help them to find Reese, and then ultimately her guilt and decision to help him at the end. All that stuff is really good. Finch being concerned for Reese is something I found I seem to always enjoy when it happens in the show. It was a little bit quick in one of the episodes, but for the most part, whenever Finch is worried that Reese might be in trouble and wants to help him, it's usually quite heartwarming. And I think that's something that the show has going for it that is really adding a lot to it, is that the connection between Reese and Finch, while they have this weird kind of like caged personal life, this privacy thing they've got going, there is kind of a heartwarming quality to this friendship. And even Carter as well, like this sort of bond that's forming feels kind of heartwarming. And I wouldn't be surprised if I end up feeling the same way with Fusco, with the others at some point down the line. But I think that heart there helps it out when it's, because it's being a cool, slick action show and it's got twists and turns and all that. But actually caring about the characters and having a little bit of humanity at the center of it, I think is really cool. Also, it would be absolutely absurd to not point this out, actually. I mentioned the book earlier that Reese picked up and the photograph fell out of. Notably, I think that book, and I might get the exact thing wrong, but it was either Ghost in the Machine or something akin to that phrase. Maybe just Deus Ex Machina. But it, this show is about a machine that's giving them information, and he's picked up a book referring to a consciousness in a machine. I can't help but notice that and feel like there might be a little bit of foreshadowing at play in this episode of Person of Interest. So, I have to mention that. Come on, it's important. So there you go. That is my thoughts on this episode of Person of Interest. I am excited for the next one. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. But of course, the main thing you can do is go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the content coming by supporting all the efforts over there for however much you can afford per month. But that is me, so thank you once again. I'll see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?